What is your local urban legend? Posted 10 days ago. Please do like, share, and subscribe. Here in North Carolina, we have the Devil's Tramping Grounds, a radius of land where nothing grows and animals act weird. Legend says that the devil goes there at night circling, planning evil ideas. There's a population of black panthers living in the Blue Mountains or Western Sydney. It's meant to be traced back to a few escaped animals from a local zoo a few decades ago. The government has actually tried to disprove it, but I 100% believe it. There have been hundreds of sightings over the years, and some pretty good camera footage, too. When I was a kid, there was a house nearby that had a doll in the front picture window. The clothes were changed on it nearly every day. The story was that the girl that lived there had been struck by a car and died. Her mother was overcome with grief and couldn't accept the girl's death, so she made clothes for the doll and put it in the window for everyone to see. Some years later, a reporter at a local paper had heard the story and went to talk to the lady. Turns out that sewing was just her hobby, and she made the doll clothes for fun. She and her husband had raised a family there, never lost any of their children. It's about a kid who's making use of the local straightaway road that's rarely used by other vehicles to gun his new motorcycle, even though his father warned him not to drive too fast. The boy's younger, jealous brother lashes a thin rope to trees across the road, hoping to knock his brother off his bike as a prank. A miscalculation of height, coupled with reckless speed, decapitates the brother, and the motorbike drives for a quarter-mile straight as an arrow before finally crashing out. Many nights we spent looking for the ghostly headlights that appear and scramble enacting their fateful crash of the headless rider and bike. We hightailed it out of there a few times after people freaking saying they saw something when I was a kid. My area has an infamous urban legend called Bunnyman. There's a disused bridge in the middle of nowhere, and legend has it that if you go to that bridge at night, especially on Halloween, a guy in a bunny suit will appear, kill you with an axe, and hang you from the bridge. There are a lot of versions of the story. One involves the Bunnyman being an escaped patient from a mental hospital who survived in the woods, eating rabbits, wearing their skin, and hanging up their bodies. Some legends say he'll throw an axe at your car. It actually goes back to a true event from 1970, when a man in a white bunny suit was reported to have thrown a hatchet at a car where a couple was making out, shouting that they were on private property. Then, a few days later, a guy in a white bunny suit was seen hacking at a house under construction and telling people they were trespassing. There's a Bunnyman brewery that just opened in the area too. There's a family in the area with 4 sons. Youngest is early 30s, oldest is mid 40s, who were pretty involved with gang stuff back in the day. The area cleaned up mostly, but you hear stories about all of them about how each of them could beat up 3 to 4 people by themselves, about their drug dealings, gun violence, etc. These are not common at all in the area, but they're all pretty normal. I mean, they're involved in bad shit, or were. They claim to have broken away from that stuff, but they have their wits about them, all except for the eldest son, Pipes. He rides around a beat-up bike with no plates, spray-painted black, a ram's skull in the handlebars, dresses in black leather, hair and beard is a mess. He's tall and thin but sinewy and much stronger than he looks, and he's obviously not okay in the head. Even his eyes have the crazy look about them. About him, you hear the craziest stories of all, and many of them are essentially legends, but many are not, but it's hard to know which is which. One of the craziest I've heard, which was when I was a kid, was that he was in a roof party in his neighborhood, and there was a recess on the shape of the roof between where the balconies are below. So, legend has it that people in the party would take turns running and jumping across the gap, which is definitely doable, but it's no small either. Well, when it was Pipe's turn, he actually didn't make it and fell all the way down 4 stories, 5 for Americans, and not only did he live, but he immediately got back up and kept on drinking. I can't say I really believe it, but then again, I've seen him beat up 2 beefy thugs known in my area who were too afraid to fight back because of who he was. Those same 2 dudes are often roaming around coked up, picking fights with randoms over nothing, and almost beat another dude to death last summer. Reason being Pipes saw them trying to pick a fight with a random kid, and he's actually chaotic good. This is a multi-layered one. So there's a rehabilitation center like 20 minutes from my home. Now it's mostly used for physical injuries, but back in Soviet era, it was a top secret relaxation place for high party officials, with a massive bunker underneath. Next to this rehab center is a nature reserve, which was highly protected back in those days. Concrete and barbed wire fences, guards patrolling, probably because it was private hunting ground for party members. But there's a legend that there's a pyramid buried in one of the hills there. It's a gathering spot for the nation's occultists to this very day, despite the large finds that follow it. Purple Perp Aki, Merseyside, not really a legend because he actually exists and is now part of the local folklore. He's a big black dude who will come and squeeze your muscles. The Midnight Train. Legend goes there was a multiple train wreck of a head-on of two locomotives on the same track in the Old West days. That rail line is still in use to this day. Right after midnight, if it is quiet enough, you can still hear the ghost of the train brakes still screech and people screaming. I heard some cops were called to a house party in the country to help find a lost kid. When they got there, the cops could hear crying from inside the house but couldn't find anything. After a long time searching, an officer radioed in for instructions and was told to leave. By that time, 3 more cars had pulled up to look and everyone was questioned. Upon hearing this, many of the partygoers asked for a ride home. A few admitted they were on drugs but just wanted out of there, even if it meant a night in the tank. I told this to an officer, and he mentioned a lot of cops in our area see phantom passengers and hitchhikers. He looked genuinely nervous discussing this. The ancient pre-Roman Celtic people, we're talking about 3,000 years ago. Where I grew up, I believed in a horn god. This god has been identified by scholars as the root cause for the horned goat image of Satan. The area is still regularly visited by modern-day Celts, Wiccans, and Satanists. There are also regular sightings of so-called black-eyed children in the area. My area is not too populated, and in the 1930s nobody really had any advanced communication equipment apart from what was standard in the boats in 1930s Norway. There was a small fjord where there was a settlement. I don't want to leak my location, so I'll call it the South Point. There were 2 fishermen from the South Point who went fishing one day, and they had had some kind of failure with their boat and had to contact help. The nearest help they could get was in Bergen, a few hours away by car on modern roads. The rescue team from Bergen arrived with, quote, 3 larger than average boats, and suddenly they just sank to the ground. Nobody knows why. Thing is, it was proven to be true, as one day someone went diving and discovered 4 shipwrecks, 1 small fishing vessel, and 3 identical far larger boats. Antubanyu, literally translated as water ghost. If you ask a random person in my area, chances are they will have their own story about Antubanyu. It has a monkey face, super long hair, and lurking under the calm river, waiting for their unsuspecting victims. They will suck their victims' brains and leave them floating away miles from the victims first reported missing. Near my school was a street called Ghost House Lane. There was a primary school legend called the Cobbler based around it. According to the story, a local cobbler was murdered by his wife's lover and sought his revenge with a ghostly axe. I've never found out how the street actually got its name, but the story terrified me as a kid. There was a tree in the playground which had a knot shaped like a keyhole, and there were rumors that the cobbler could unlock it and take you to hell. The Monster of Elizabeth Lake. One of the multiple Elizabeth Lake locations throughout California is said to carry an evil presence below the water surface. The Elizabeth Lake, just outside of Lancaster in LA, is said to have been created by the devil himself for the keeping of his hellish pets. The urban legend continues to state that a passageway to hell can be found if you swim deep into the lake. The first sighting of the monster of Elizabeth Lake dates back all the way to 1880. The monster is said to have the neck of a giraffe, head of a bulldog, bat wings, an estimated 50 feet long, and smells of rancid decay. For the next century, sightings of the monster of Elizabeth Lake would continue to be reported and strike fear into the locals' hearts. The locals would be so scared that landowners would actually sell or completely abandon their property. Also, attempts to build on the lake's land came to no avail. At night, residents could hear awful screams from the lake and would have terrible visions. Farm animals would disappear and sightings of a flying winged creature were reported to be seen overhead. Ranchers in the 1800s have even tried to capture the beast, with one of the legends saying that a group of men did in fact kill the monster. However, any proof of the creature's existence or death has yet to be discovered. I don't know if this qualifies as an urban legend, maybe it's better characterized as local tea, but there was a man that went missing in my town maybe a decade or two ago by the name of Wayne Flagg. The man suspected of murdering him used to live on the same road as the house I'm currently living in. The story and theories are a bit different depending on who you ask here. Some say he was burned alive in a nearby factory incinerator. Some say he simply vanished in the woods. A few people believe it was paranormal. I often find bones out in the woods on my property and always keep them out of a superstitious belief that it could be Wayne. We had this typical haunted house, like a very old house that had been abandoned for decades for it was haunted yada yada yada. Mostly a kid's thing, of course, but most were afraid to go there. Was it grounds for a huge deal of bets and dares and stuff? Don't know about it nowadays though, it's been some years. We actually did sleep there once when we were like 12 or so years old, told our parents we'd be hanging at another friend's place and instead went there, with sleeping bags and snacks and stuff. I didn't quite catch the horror aspect to be very honest, but I enjoyed just roaming through an unknown house. It was obviously a bit smelly and sort of a wreck, but still worth a visit. The White Lady. On the edge of my town, there's a quiet woodland road which goes through a chalk cutting. Basically, the road has high chalk walls on each side with trees looming over it. About a mile or so up that road, there's an old iron trail bridge that crosses right above it, leading from one side of the woods to the other. Legend has it that a Victorian lady dressed in white died on that bridge, either in a riding accident where she was flung from the bridge, or that she hanged herself there after her baby died, and of course, that her ghost still haunts the area. People say you can summon her by standing under the bridge at night and saying, white lady, I have your baby." I've personally tried it and nothing happened, but that road and the bridge is a genuinely creepy place with or without any ghosts, in my opinion. We've got Third Bridge. Head out east of Denver on a specific road and eventually you'll cross 2 bridges, then come to a third. You'll know you're at the right one because there's a creepy barn slightly southeast that usually has a red or green light above the door. Legend has it, one of the native tribes was massacred here. If you stop and turn off the car, you might hear drums beating in the distance. If you cross the bridge, park, and walk back to the bridge, you might see the spirit of the chief on horseback charge you, in one final attempt to save his people. We went there a lot in high school trying to scare ourselves, but the scariest thing we ever saw was the creepy barn. Halfhead was our local urban legend in upstate New York. Halfhead's farmhouse was abandoned after he was cleaning his shotgun and blew off half of his head. He haunts the old farmhouse and the woods nearby. I've been to the house with friends and it was mostly empty and completely abandoned. We went there at night, and when we were coming down the stairs, a friend of mine said he felt something grab his foot, and he fell partially through part of the stairs. In hindsight, I think what he felt was gravity and old wood giving way, but at the time, we all screamed like little girls and ran out of the house. I live in Belém, Brazil. There are many urban legends here. One of the most interesting ones are about a shape-shifting witch named Martina Pereira. The myth states that she is an old woman that haunts the streets of cities in the north region of Brazil. She wanders every night with no destination on sight, whistling while she passes through residents and buildings, hoping to catch and scare unaware citizens roaming the streets. She shapeshifts into an owl, Sundara, flying into residences and staring or scaring the residents. Many show fear when the Sundara screeches whilst flying through their homes, afraid that the witch is watching them. That there's a black panther loose in the woodland. Know a few people who have claimed to have seen it, including my uncle who lived on a 100-acre farm for his childhood and said it ran past him while he was dirt biking. I believe there's probably a chance one was released in the 70s when the exotic animal ban came in, but probably not anymore. My town has several ghosts. I'll go over 2. The Grey Lady supposedly haunts the local church. It has a large tower and a number of people who have jumped off of it over the years. Legend says if you chant her name after midnight, she'll appear. Many a foolish person have tried and ended up looking silly. My mom claims she was one of them, but who knows. Mickey the Monk supposedly haunts the local arts center. which is on the site of a former monastery. People claim he steals knives and other sharp objects because he allegedly murdered a fellow monk. I spent most of my teenage years as part of the drama troupe there and never saw any sign of him, but things did occasionally go missing and show up in weird places. There is a crumbling abandoned industrial building on the outskirts of my town that is believed to be haunted. It hasn't been used in years, but the owners still hire security to keep thrill-seeking youths away from it. In the 1980s, at the peak of the satanic panic, the FBI actually came to town to investigate rumors that it was being used as a site for occult rituals and blood sacrifices. They found nothing definitive, big surprise, except for some edgy graffiti, but the owners filled the basement with concrete and fenced the entire plot of land with barbed wire. This has only added to its spooky appeal, and going urban exploring out there is considered an adolescent rite of passage. I live where quite a few historically famous deaths occurred, so we never run out of ghost stories. The only one without substance is my old middle school being haunted by a girl who broke her neck falling down a staircase. The teachers and principal used to prank students using elements from this story so often that the ghost girl pranks ended up in all the yearbooks until there were too many parent complaints to continue. There used to be a sizable prison facility a little ways outside of town. The prison had several prison buildings to house the inmates and a fair-sized town to house the guards and their families. The facility grew to be quite big until it closed almost 50 years ago. Legend has it that one of the guards killed himself when the facility closed because he didn't want to leave. He never did. In the 1990s, all of the buildings except for one of the jail buildings were torn down and is still there to this day. Some say that you can hear a nightstick hitting metal bars in the basement of what remains of the building, and former residents of the town agree that it is probably the guard that killed himself.